Okay. Ben, to your left right here.
Hi, Ben. My name is Rivka. So I have a question. I would like to know, why are so many Jews so liberal, and what can we do to change that? Because it's terrible.
Okay, so the reason that so many Jews are so liberal is because most Jews do not have any relationship with actual Judaism. So it's important to recognize that when people say somebody is Jewish, there's two standards of Judaism. There's ethnic Judaism, as in like you have a mother who's Jewish in the Orthodox sense, or the way that the census does it. You have a parent who's Jewish, or you self-identify as Jewish. And then there is Judaism as a religion. Judaism as a religion is very conservative, which is why 70% of Orthodox Jews vote Republican. Right? 70% of Jews overall vote Democrat, but 70% of Orthodox Jews vote Republican because they care about Israel, because they care about abortion, because they care about traditional marriage, because they care about all of these things. So that's the real reason. The way to change that is by recognizing that if you are, it depends. Are these Jews that we're talking about, secular Jews that we're talking about, open to conservative argument more on a secular level, or are they more open to the religious argument? If they're more open to the religious argument, then I would say the first step is get them to go to synagogue once in a while. And if not, then I would say that the first step is to make a good secular argument in the way that you'd make a secular argument to anybody else. Right? When I argue, I'm an Orthodox Jew, I almost never cite the Bible, specifically because the vast majority of people are not convinced by arguments from the Bible. You have to be working within the confines of the Bible to accept an argument from the Bible. Most people want to hear a secular argument, and so those are the arguments we ought to be making in public policy. So you have to decide who it is you're talking to. You're talking to somebody from a religious perspective. You're talking to somebody who just happens to have a last name ending in Burgerstein, and now you're trying to convince them to vote Republican.
We have one over here.
Hi, Ben. My family loves you. My mom thinks you're the best guy ever, after her husband.
Good. That's proper prioritization.
I actually have two parts. The first is, what advice do you have for younger people going into politics where people say, oh, we don't have any experience? And then the second part is, can you sign my friend Heather's Tumblr that says leftist tears?
So if she comes up here, then I will definitely sign her Tumblr. And as far as what advice I have for young people getting into politics, the same advice that I give to everyone: read. Okay, age comes with experience, but the truth is, whatever experience you have from the time you're 20 to the time you're 60 is nothing compared to the collective experience of the crowd. The way that we mostly get the best ideas is by reading about those ideas. If you were just born into society and never read a book, I don't care if you're 70, you're probably going to end up an idiot. Okay, the reality is that life experience teaches a certain number of things, but it turns out that centuries of experience that you can read about in books teach you a lot more. So I don't agree that we should all resonate to bumper sticker slogans. I think the only thing that really matters is, can you educate yourself to the point where you actually know what it is that you're talking about, and also know what you don't know, so that you know what to tackle next. I can listen to the next question while I sign.
Back to your left, Ben, as well.
Hi, Ben. My name's Tara. I'm a huge fan. But one of the big questions I've always had is, if you do decide to run in 2024, what do we have to do to work on your campaign?
Well, I'm taking volunteer signups in the back, but it's, you know, I am number 3 in the betting markets, apparently. So it's, you know, I love the fact that there are so many young people who listen to what I say, and I'm really appreciative of it. Email me, we'll put you on file, and then if that's something we decide to do, then we'll get back to you.
We have one over here. To your right.
Okay. Hi, Ben. I heard about you on Joe Rogan, and I've been listening to your podcast ever since, but I have a question. When I'm older, I want to go into law and then news commentating. What's your best advice for going into that field as a conservative, and does law help you with that?
So I'm a big advocate for getting a law degree for the simple reason that, two simple reasons. One is that our society is very much based on credentialing. You know, we have a society that really likes credentials. If you have a law degree, then people think you're smarter than you actually are. It's worked for me so far. The other reason is because law actually teaches you how to think in a certain legalistic way. It allows you to read some of the laws that are being passed, so it's good for political analysis. Like for example, when James Comey was making the announcement about Hillary Clinton, right, in July, I could immediately pull up the law, read the law, and recognize that he was making up his own legal standard that had nothing to do with reality. Right? There are certain things that you just know as a lawyer that you wouldn't know otherwise. As far as news commentating, what I've always said is that you have to bring people information first and then commentary. So everyone has an opinion. The question is, how much information can you convey, which is one of the reasons why I spend an awful lot of time on my show and in my writing trying to convey information first and then give my opinion. And I think that also creates a good a good model for having conversations, because first we have to agree on a common basis of facts, and then we can decide, whether we agree on the argument that springs from those facts.
So what advice do you have for when arguing with leftists and all they're doing is screaming names at you? So what advice do you have? Because
Okay, so this is the part where you don't have to be nice. Okay, so...
Well, yes, okay,
Right.
but you can't use logic with them because they
Right.
turn their brain off to you, and you can't appeal to their emotion because they hate you.
Right. So the first thing you have to do is determine whether this is a conversation that's even worth taking part in. Right? I mean, there is a door right there. Sometimes it's just worth leaving because you're wasting breaths and you'll need those back when you're dying and all that. So, is it worth time ranting at someone on Facebook or Twitter? This is a rule that I unfortunately do not apply often enough to myself. That's number one. Number two is if somebody calls you a name, if somebody says without a basis that you are a racist, sexist, bigot, homophobe, which is their favorite thing ever to do, then your proper response is no, you're an asshole. Right? And you're allowed to actually say that, the reason being that when you call somebody a name without any sort of evidence, this is what makes you, technically speaking, in the dictionary definition, an asshole. So it is worthwhile at that point to say that, because you're not speaking from a non-evidentiary position, right? Your evidence that they're being this kind of jackass is that they are doing this. And at that point, then you can say, okay, we're done here, right? Or alternatively, they can say, well, why do you think that? And you can say, well, because you're not using evidence. Would you like to actually have an argument now?
Hi, I have a question. So statistically speaking, it's known that most college professors are liberal. So what advice would you have as a conservative college student when you're dealing with professors that use that authoritative position to silence conservatives?
So so first of all, I want to point out that there are some professors who are willing to silence people in the classroom. There are some professors who are willing not to. So you have to determine which is which, really. I don't think it's fair to assume that all of them are just because they're on the left. Some of my best professors have been professors on the left. With that said, if you run into a professor who actually is discriminating against you, what I've always said is, if you don't have any recourse with the administration, shut up. Okay, now, I know that this is controversial, really. I know that my friend Dennis Prager, I'm good friends with Dennis, and Dennis is of the mind that you should really just go ahead and say what you want to say, right? And I love Dennis, but he's wrong. Dennis is wrong, because why in the world would you get a D in a class just to prove a point? Right? The whole idea here is to just run through that class, get through that class, make awful lots of money, give money back to the school, and then threaten to cut off that money unless they fire that particular discriminatory teacher.
Hi. So I'm considering law school. I was wondering, would you recommend getting a undergrad political science or going to a great books college?
It actually doesn't matter very much, is the truth. So the law schools right now, in terms of admissions, are looking for people who are not necessarily poli-sci majors. So they started looking outside the realm of poli-sci, because everyone who's a poli-sci major applies to law school. So I don't think that one makes a huge, enormous difference, actually.
Hi, Ben. Thanks for speaking today. So I'll be co-teaching with a professor an Intro to Freshman Life class at my college, and they're going to give me curriculum to teach. And I've recently read an article from the college newspaper saying that they're going to focus on race, gender, and sexuality.
Oh, good times.
Yeah, instead of actual freshman issues. And I'm worried about hitting the boundary of where I'm going to have to teach things I don't believe in. So how can I, portray what my beliefs and my morals and what I believe in to these students, but still allow them to make a decision of what they want to believe in themselves?
Well, I mean, I don't know how flexible your administration is, and I don't know how much your job is at stake based on what you actually are teaching these students. So these are factors that you're going to have to decide for yourself to a certain extent. What I would say is that if it were I would teach what they want me to teach, and then I would immediately say, and here's why I think this is bullshit. Right? So you're teaching both sides, right? I mean, I think that it's fair to say, here's the counter argument to what it is that you're promoting here. But I'm not sure that your school will let you get away with that. If it comes down to, right, and they may not. And so then you just have to decide whether you think you're doing more good in the position as somebody who can, maintain a certain standard of lifestyle in the dorms, for example, when you're actually performing with individuals, or whether it's better to quit, right? Right, so if you have your own office hours, then what I would suggest is, at the very end saying something like, listen, I understand there may be a lot of people who disagree with some of the material in this. I may disagree with some of the material in this, but I have office hours, so I'm always my door is always open to talk with you. And if you can get away with that, I think that's better than probably quitting and have some leftists teach them all this nonsense.
Hi, Mr. Shapiro. I'm a huge fan of your show. I listen almost every day.
Oh, thank you.
My name is Koki, and I'm a Mizzou law student. You came to Mizzou a few years ago.
Yep.
Yeah, that's actually how I...
That was the very last time I traveled without security.
Right. So I just kind of like to hear your perspective now on the Black Lives Matter movement and everything that sort of came after everything that happened at Mizzou, because, I mean, we're still dealing with that.
Right, I mean, you guys lost admissions, and people stopped applying, and you lost donations,
It's been a horrible problem for our school, so we would love to have you back, first of all.
I appreciate it, yeah.
Please come back and talk. But I just would love to hear your opinion about that.
Well, I mean, I think that the movement has, to a certain extent, petered out. In one sense, it's petered out. In another, it's sort of been mainstreamed into the platform of the Democratic Party and the left. So in the sense that you're not seeing these giant protests in the streets because you don't have an administration that is fostering giant protests in the streets, it's petered out. And obviously President Trump has not been particularly warm toward these sorts of arguments, and good for him, because the data just don't back up those arguments. But you have seen that there is this belief that has been mainstreamed and even taken up by some of the libertarian right, saying that, no, it's true, the criminal justice system is wildly biased against black people, and that black people are being randomly shot by the police, and there's a problem of systemic bias in police departments and all of this stuff. I think that it's worthwhile fighting back on that as much as ever. I think that those are arguments that tend to get a little bit more play when a leftist is in office giving air to them. And it seems like those arguments just aren't getting a lot of air in the public sphere right now because there's unified Republican control of government.
Hi, Ben. New fan. Very impressed so far. My question is, on my campus, we have a socialist group that formed specifically against Turning Point. They've called us Nazis, fascists, KKK, the usual. And they've been calling for us to be removed from the campus and expelled.
Been there, yeah.
They've attacked Candace Owens face-to-face. They called her, a white supremacist.
Yeah.
And
always a smart move, yeah.
Yeah. They've been doxing us, posting our pictures and everything. My question is, what is the best course of action? We table and they come up to us in debate, and it just seems we're not getting anywhere.
Well, I mean, I'm not sure you're going to get anywhere with the people who are your chief critics, but I think that mockery is absolutely warranted. I mean, when they are extreme enough to suggest that Candace Owens is a white supremacist, for example, I think that is definitely worthy of mockery. And asking them what makes her a white supremacist and catching it on tape and putting it on YouTube is fully worthwhile. And I think I'm sure you're doing that, right? I mean, exactly. So, I mean, sunlight is the best disinfectant for a lot of this sort of thought. Again, you have to fight back against these slurs, but I'm very much in favor of being aggressive with the socialists. I mean, these are people who are backing an economic system that is responsible for the deaths of literally over 100 million people. So it seems to me that they don't have a real moral leg to stand on when it comes to pushing their philosophy. That said, I mean, I think that you have to determine what your crowd is. As always, you have to determine who your audience is. Is your audience the people you're arguing with? No. Your audience is the people who are outside that room. And so sometimes it may be better to just ignore the people who you're talking to and talk to the people beyond them, or to use these people as an example of things you should not do. Also, I think that it's worthwhile just saying to them, if you want to have an open debate in front of the school, you put up your best, we'll put up our best, and we'll do it. And they'll turn you down. They'll say that they don't want to do it. And then you say, well, you're anti-free speech because you don't want to do this, right? I mean, you don't want to have a debate. All you want to do is shout at the moon. Well, if you want to shout at the moon, enjoy yourself. But obviously, there's only one side here that actually wants to have a serious conversation.
Hi, big fan. I just had a question about, my school has actually denied a Turning Point USA chapter for about 2 years now, but they have a Gay-Straight Alliance. So my question is, how do I go about giving the conservatives that come after me a voice, because I won't be around, I'll be in the Marine Corps. So how do I go about giving them a voice so that they're not afraid to speak their mind and be free with their views, because we get shut down so often?
So we had sort of this problem when I was at UCLA. There's administrative bias against particular conservative groups, and what you very often have to do is go outside and just get funding from outside the university, right? You have to go find individual donors who are willing to actually give you money to perform activities on campus. And in terms of tabling, so, okay, you don't table. You find other ways of distributing your message. That's sometimes all you can do. And then, of course, you can protest and you can publicize the fact that they're rejecting a Turning Point chapter for no apparent reason other than their political bias. Do you go to a state school or do you go to a private school? Oh, okay. So is it a public school or is it a private school? Okay, so if it's a public school, then I don't really see how, if they are granting legitimacy to particular points of view, that may actually be a First Amendment lawsuit, depending on whether they are performing viewpoint discrimination. They're saying that it's offensive. Well, then they'd have to make that case in court. Right? It turns out that very often public schools don't actually want to litigate. So you might want to talk to our friends over at Lions Defending Freedom, for example, and see if they'll go out there and do some work for you.
One over here.
Hi, Ben.
Howdy.
So I just finished my first year of college, and I've been struggling with choosing to pick a major and what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. So I was just wondering if you always knew what you were going to do, and if you have advice to decide and figure out what you were going to do.
So I did not know always what I was going to do. I was always, interested in history. I was always interested in politics and speaking. I was doing I remember I won a speech contest against 8th graders when I was in 3rd grade and such. But when I went to college, I actually thought that I was going to major in biology, and I thought that I was going to work for Amgen and do genetic biology, and I thought that I was going to double major in music because I was a concert violinist at the time. And the first week I was on campus, basically, I walked over to a kiosk that had the Daily Bruin in it, and I looked at the Daily Bruin, and there was an editorial comparing Ariel Sharon, who was then Prime Minister of Israel, to Adolf Eichmann, the Nazi. And I walked into the editorial office and I said, "Can I write a counter to that?" And that turned into this. So you never know where life is going to take you. What I would say is that the way you should be thinking is a combination of a few things. One, what are you good at doing? Like an honest assessment of what is it that you're good at, because you're not going to really enjoy something you're bad at. So what are you good at doing? What is something you enjoy doing? And what is something that you feel makes a difference in the world? If you can find the confluence of those three things, then you're going to, I think, pursue a career that is worthwhile and enjoyable. If you're missing any one of those three factors, it's going to be very difficult for you. If you have a big skill set, then figure out which way you think you can make the most difference in the world and what you enjoy doing. Don't try to force yourself into one or the other box, that you're doing something that is worthwhile but you hate, or you're doing something you like but you feel is completely worthless. I think that if you can find meaning and purpose in your work, you're going to live a much happier life. This is true, by the way, for everyone. There's a great book called Flow, all about the times in your life when you're the happiest. And basically what it says is when you are struggling to overcome a barrier and you are working very hard at it, but you feel very ensconced in the struggle, you feel like you're trying to pursue a particular goal using the best of your abilities, this is the happiest you ever are in your life. This is true for everyone. It doesn't matter what that task is. But that means that you ought to find whatever it is that you think is a purposeful life and then pursue that. The good news is I'm writing an entire book on the history of Western civilization in the context of this exact question. But the bad news is you're going to have to read it.
Speaking of, sign my book.
Yeah, bring it here.
Right up the middle, Ben. Right here. Up the middle.
Yeah.
Guys, unfortunately, we only have time for this last question, so thank you all.
Hi, Mr. Shapiro. My name is Cheyenne Martin. I go to Georgetown University. I say that because I was very sad when you couldn't attend.
I was very sad as well.
Yeah, they made the joke that the snowflakes finally won.
Yeah, they did. It was unbelievable, by the way. It snows in D.C. Just come to class.
I know. Anyway, I have a personal ambition of working for Naval Special Warfare as an operations planner.
Wow.
And then after that, I would like to either be the ICE director or CIA director.
Okay.
And because... Thank you. Because of these ambitions, I've often been called racist, bigot, homophobe, all that. And I've actually been subject to physical and verbal harassment by students and some professors, outside of class. Luckily, the administration has taken care of most of these issues. But my question is, even after you've been a decent person, political discourse, join all the few club organizations that are on campus, how do you face this fear and overcome it of being harassed and just constantly bullied by these huge group of people, especially when you're surrounded by it? Also, I have a Ben Shapiro Thug Life shirt.
So, as someone who's I've met my fair share of sort of group harassment and such. I was the #1 target, according to the Anti-Defamation League, of anti-Semitic tweets among Jewish journalists on planet Earth in 2016. So I've gotten my fair share of this. I understand it. It is difficult. I'm not going to pretend that it's not hard or that it's easier. You can just sort of brush it off. You do have to grow a thick skin. There's no real other choice other than to do that. And the only way to do that is to recognize that the only people who really have power over your life, the only person who has power over your life is you, unless they're physically harming you, in which case call the cops. But in terms of how you respond emotionally to what somebody else does, I have sort of a stoic philosophy on this, which is you can't control what anyone else is going to do to you, but you can control your own reaction to what it is that somebody else does with you. There's a prayer that we say 3 times a day in Orthodox Judaism that at the very end of sort of the most holy part of the service, in which we say that we pray to God that our souls should be like dust to our enemies, meaning that we should be able to absorb the body blows and treat it as though it's nothing, right? And that's very difficult, right? It's something you have to work on daily. But when you know that you're in the right, and when you know that there are a whole group of people who also support you, and they may not be here right now, they may not be with you at that exact moment, but there are a whole group of people who are out there rooting for you and supporting you and believing what it is that you believe, because what you believe is virtuous and true, then I think that gives you a lot more comfort. And it's lonely out there. I know. Again, I've been there. It's lonely out there, but understand that there's not just this room full of people. There are literally millions upon millions of people who agree with your perspective and who believe that you're doing the right thing and trying to do something good for the country. And that should at least give you